Welcome to another episode of The Catholic Novel. Today we're going to talk about John Hassler's A Green Journey. I think John Hassler was one of the great novelists of the 21st century and never got the attention he deserved. Rereading A Green Journey has been a terrific experience for me. The characteristic I would put on John Hassler's novels are he writes about people who are extremely likable, even lovable. And they're likable and lovable even when he's talking about their faults. I never met him. I don't know what he was like as outside of his novels, but he must have been a very compassionate man, a very sensitive man. So that even when he's poking fun, and I'll give you an example of one of them in a minute, it seems gentle to me. Okay, so these are people he writes about people I know, and I suspect all of us know. So this is the story of Agatha McGee, a teacher who is in her 60s, very near retirement, and I guess, I think it's okay to say, a rather conservative Catholic. You know, she's found Vatican II quite upsetting. She doesn't understand why we went from Latin to English, and several other things she objects to. And now my immediate reaction is almost the exact opposite. Almost everything that happened with Vatican II I love, okay? But I want to read what she says, and then I want to tell you what my reaction is when I read it. So this is early on in the novel, okay? So she's thinking about her vocation as a teacher, which she takes very seriously, and she's thinking that what's happening to the contemporary church. She's in church. The church is St. Isidore's. This is the description. The organ boomed. The choir stood up to sing, and out onto the altar streamed 12 acolytes, a cloud of incense, and the pastor, Father Finn. It was a fine ceremony to Agatha's way of thinking. In the old days, you never judged Catholic ritual. A mass was a mass. But nowadays, church-going could be a horrifying surprise. Guitars on the altar, female acolytes, charismatics babbling in tongues. Luckily for St. Isidore's, thought Agatha, that Father Finn remained the pastor year after year. He approved a change when Rome gave him no choice, Mass in English, communion in the hand, but when left on his own, he was too stable, according to Agatha and half her fellow parishioners, to depart from tradition, or too dull-witted, according to the other half. And lucky for the Diocese of Barrington as a whole, that Bishop Swales stayed in charge long past retirement age. Such a dear old reactionary, Bishop Swales. Surely his replacement, when the dreaded time came, would be some progressive hotshot like the current Bishop of Duluth, who last month had officiated at a polka mass in his cathedral. And it goes on. Now here's my first reaction is I disagree with almost everything she says, and yet I really like her. And that happens to me reading Hassler's novels, okay? I mentioned before that even when he's gently making fun of people, it's gentle. So a friend of Agatha's, it seems to be a bit of an airhead, okay? There's not too much going on upstairs, okay? So her name is Lillian, and here's the way Hassler describes her. The woman was honest, simple-hearted, and enviably placid. Nevertheless, it was a mind spongy with sentiment and empty of logic. And the light it gave off was so dim that it sometimes made Agatha shudder the way she used to when she was 6 and afraid of the dark. So in other words, it doesn't give off much light, okay? And yet as the novel progresses, you love the friend too, okay? Now what's the main point of the novel? What's the Green Journey? Reading a Catholic newspaper, Agatha comes upon a letter from a James O'Hannon who expresses views very similar to her own. So she writes to the paper, congratulating the paper on publishing James O'Hannon's letter. Then she and James begin a correspondence. He lives in Ireland. As the novel develops, you become aware that even though she's very strong, even though she's very dedicated, Agatha is a lonely person. And as the correspondence with James goes on for some time, he begins to reveal his loneliness to her. And he actually asks her in one letter, have you ever felt lonely? Now, what happens is she gets a chance to go to Ireland. And of course, she's going to look him up because I think at this point in the novel, she almost suspects that there's some kind of a love relationship developing, which is probably very good for her loneliness and maybe also for his loneliness. So she goes to Ireland, but then she discovers that James is a priest. She goes into a church that he's supposed to be a parishioner. Turns out he's on the altar. She is furious, really furious. She feels she's been betrayed. She feels he was, completely dishonest and so on, and she confronts him. And takes her quite a while to say she forgives him. Now, this is one of the most touching love stories I have ever read. Nothing out of the order, nothing that isn't chaste and pure happens. All it is two human beings are connecting through these letters at a deeper level. And that connecting at that deeper level is a kind of a healing for their loneliness. Now, there's a sequel to this called Dear James, and I'm sure eventually I'll talk about it in this series. But let me just comment on something here. To be a person is to be made to know love and God in this world and be happy with him in the next. We're also made to love one another. So I have come to, through many years of reading philosophy and teaching philosophy, I have come to believe that everyone, the rich and the poor, the intelligent and the intellectually challenged, okay? The powerful and the weak, okay? Everyone is called to be a gift giver, everyone. And that's one of the most profound truths about the human person. To say that someone is called to be a gift giver is to say someone is called to be a lover. Now, unfortunately, we use the love, we use love in many strange ways. So what I mean by love is making a self-gift to another person. It can be very simple, opening a door for someone, greeting someone, smiling at someone, wishing someone well, forgiving someone. Or it can be very, very deep. I think the marriage vows are extremely deep. Take it for better, for worse, for rich, for poor, in sickness and health, and death do us part. I mean, a life commitment in love is tremendous. Same with religious. When young men are ordained priests, just before they're ordained, the bishop asks them, "Are you ready?" And part of the ritual is for them to answer, "Ad sum," yes, I am ready. Now, there are probably a million ways that I was not ready, okay? But out of what you believe is a vocation from God, you take a chance, you take a risk. So I would say, while among human beings, a sexual union is extremely close, there's another kind of union, and I got this from the spiritual writer Ronald Rolheiser. He calls it a moral union. And here's my understanding of it is, meeting another person at a very deep level and making contact. Not necessarily physical contact, not necessarily sexual contact. I'm tempted to say a meeting of minds. That's part of it, but it's much more than that. It's not like I agree with you and you agree with me. No, we're in tune with what really matters. We both agree on what really matters, and we find one another we find one another as an aid to ourselves, okay? So I help you, and you help me because of this deep union. I believe there is such very, very close friends. Ideally, a married couple would have not only a sexual union, but a moral union. Now, I think, and I'm going to be more sure of this when I read the sequel again, I think James and Agatha have this moral union. But it takes a while in the novel before he realizes it, I think, right away. But she doesn't. And I spotted what a really good writer John Hasser is throughout the novel, but especially when she hesitates to forgive James. She's that hurt. She feels she's betrayed. And at one point he says, "Do you forgive me?" And I'm not ruining the novel now. She can't say she does, but eventually she does. And you know that this is an experience of growth in her, and that she is healing him at the same time. So Hasler is, I think, very, very witty. Let me just see if I can find here the, yes, this is one of James's letters. So she becomes aware of how lonely James is. This is before she knows he's a priest. Okay, so here's what he said. He says, I've had only 3 true friends in my adult life, Agatha. When I was a young man teaching in Knockbridge, there was an old schoolmaster named Haggerty, who was a delight to talk books with. But I left Knockbridge after 4 years and went to Glean. And anyhow, Haggerty was in decline by that time, getting old and more drawn into himself. A different man at the end of my time at Knockbridge he was than at the beginning, forgetful. Then after I was in Green for 2 or 3 years, I began to hit it off with a shopkeeper named Johnson, a fat, ironic man who told uproarious stories. But Johnson was a Protestant, and there was wedged between us the disapproval of my fellow Catholics. They never came out and said anything, mind you, but it was always present in the air of that secretive, bigoted town on the border of Ulster, a suspicion concerning any Catholic who took up with a prod unless conversion was the motive. And when it became clear that Johnson's conversion was not my motive, they began spreading it around that my conversion was Johnson's motive. Way off the mark they were, Johnson being the next thing to an agnostic, holding his Protestant faith by the thinnest of threads. Okay, so O'Hannon then mentions a 3rd friend that he had and lost. So he's being completely honest with Agatha, and that, I guess, frightens her a little bit. All of a sudden, the relationship is going to a different level. Each is admitting loneliness to the other. And each, I think, whether they're aware of it or not, is reaching out and hoping the loneliness will be healed by the other.